Good morning, Revealing Truth Ministries family and friends, and welcome to this Thursday morning Deeper Dive Live. We are in the studio with the livest live audience in all of Tampa Bay. The staff is in the building. The staff is in the building, and you are present. And we recognize and welcome your presence. Share the stream with those that you love. The Deeper Dive gives us the opportunity to attend to the things that God has said to us as we've determined to be people who are most blessed. And here we are this is the last Thursday of the month. Yeah, last Thursday of the month. And I'm pretty sure that you live in your blessed life. We're going to continue it, right? We're going to continue to do that. We're here to take a deeper dive into Sunday's message. We're here to continue our deeper dive from Sunday's message, taught by our very own senior pastor, Pastor Brian. Give some love, put some, I don't know what you want to drop in the chat. Put some waves in the chat, some hearts in the chat, some love in the chat for Pastor Brian. Sunday's message was a call to walk worthy, right? Walk worthy of your call. And I was going through the notes in preparation for today, reflecting back on the message, and it made me think about a familiar Bible story. All of us know the story of Zacchaeus. You guys remember Zacchaeus, right? And it was interesting this morning of how many parallels there are between his experience and the message, or even if I reach back far enough, even what we saw happen with Isaiah, right? In that we know that Isaiah's had a vision of God. Isaiah had a vision of God. Well, Zacchaeus is standing in front of God, Jesus, right? God in the flesh. And the experience is so impactful that it causes change in Zacchaeus' life, right? So today we're going to reach back to Sunday's message and pull out some points from the message, paralleling them or putting them next to some things that we know happened in Zacchaeus' life. And one of the first things, just with the accepting and receiving the call to walk worthy, comes our statement, our standard statement, our statement of change: I will live holy. And one of the things that happened over the last few weeks was we were reintroduced to holiness, and we'll talk about that some as we go through the deeper dive this morning. But we reach back to Zacchaeus in Luke 19 and see how the experience that he has with Jesus calls him to live a new standard, not just after the interaction, but even in order to have the interaction, right? So he has this call to live holy. We know from his own confession that his prior behavior involved him taking advantage of people, okay? In order to maybe climb his corporate ladder or get in position, he took advantage of people by his own confession. He took advantage of people. By the end of his lunch meeting with Jesus, we see that he has a change of heart, a change of mind, right? But let's look at what happened leading up to even the invitation that he gets to sit with Jesus. Zacchaeus is in the crowd. Jesus is coming by, and the first thing that he recognizes is that he has to make a natural change. He has to change things in the physical in order even to see Jesus. Now, I may be reaching, but I think that's a good parallel to what Pastor Brian has been teaching, right? In order to make spiritual progress, you have to make natural change. Or in order to make spiritual progress, you have to set natural standards. So Zacchaeus climbed a tree in order to get a good position or perspective of Jesus. He climbed in order to see, right? And, we are learning that the same thing has to happen for us. We don't often, or in the past, we haven't married those two things, our spiritual progress and our natural disciplines. But what we're seeing now is that they go hand in hand. Like, even before you begin to see things change in your character, there's some things that you change naturally. I remember, and some of y'all, I'm sure you could recall, before you made some significant spiritual changes in your life, there are some physical changes that you made. One of the changes that I made, I rearranged my room. I rearranged my room so I could be closer to my bookcase where I had my Bible and my books that I was reading as I was learning this Christian life. There was a natural change that led to spiritual progress. And we see the same thing happen in Zacchaeus' life. The Bible doesn't give us much detail as to what led up to this desire for him to see Jesus, but we can, if we look at the New Testament stories in its entirety, I'm sure word was spreading about this man from Nazareth that was going around healing people, right? The possibilities of him being a Messiah. We'll talk about this later, but I want to just introduce the thought now. I get the feeling that some of the things that were thought about Zacchaeus didn't necessarily, he didn't see himself as that. So the idea in his culture in the time that he was living in was because he's a tax collector. Like, he was one of the worst of the worst, right? Tax collectors were in cahoots with the Roman government, with the authority. So you were automatically on every Jewish person's bad list. And I'm sure that Zacchaeus fit many people's stereotypes of just being a terrible person. But I don't think that stereotype necessarily fit the way that he saw himself. You know how it is. Oftentimes in our own lives, in our own experiences, the thing that people think about you and the thing that they say about you is not necessarily you. Like, you haven't embraced the villain, but in many cases you've been put out to be that, right? And in some cases you do more stuff just because you know that this is what people think about me. I imagine Zacchaeus being in a similar place where he knows the stereotype. He knows what people think about him, even though on the inside, he's like, man, I'm really not that dude, right? I may be acting out of some things based on other people's expectation, but that's not really who I am. How can we say that? Because this man had a desire to see Jesus. If he was as bad as people thought that he would be, would he have this desire, right? So I believe that Zacchaeus was in this place where he wants change, and he's kind of been trapped in other people's ideas about him, including his own self-limitations, and he's searching for a way out. So he humbles himself enough to climb a tree. I don't know how he handled himself otherwise, but here it is, affluent man. He's wealthy, he's rich. But homeboy said, bump all that, I'm about to climb this tree so I can see Jesus, right? So he humbles himself in order to climb a tree, which again emphasizes the importance of us recognizing that there are natural disciplines that we can make in order to lead to spiritual progress, right? Zacchaeus climbed. We also see in that he embraces a new attitude. Literally, his new attitude led to new altitudes, right? I mean, he's up in this tree. He's at a new altitude because he has a new attitude about life. And because he did that, right? His new attitude led to him literally changing his altitude, climbing this tree. He's able to, not only is he able to see Jesus, but Jesus is able to see him. Like, if he had not climbed, would Jesus even saw him? And we know that when Jesus sees him up in that tree, he gets an invitation to have lunch. This may be a reach again, but I just recall the scriptures that say that when we draw nigh to him, he'll draw nigh to us. And I think that this illustrates Zacchaeus' step to get closer to Jesus, right? And as a result, we see Jesus respond. And I think that there's so much beauty in that. Just reaching back to a message that Pastor Brian shared a few weeks ago, is God doesn't wait in order for the results to show up to begin to reward us. God rewards the seekers. And I think that's such a beautiful thing, that even though maybe the big hang-ups in our character or the big hang-ups in our habits, maybe those haven't changed. But because I changed my approach, I changed my routine, I changed and polished my tone, like I'm beginning to take the steps that leads to these bigger changes. Like nothing, as far as we know, Zacchaeus had not at this point made the big changes in his life. At this point, he hadn't decided to give back the money that he took from people. He hadn't made that decision yet. But this change led to the big change. This small change in attitude led to the bigger changes that we see. And I think it was a result of him just wanting to see Jesus, right? And his desire to see Jesus, Jesus sees him and meets him, where he is. And that goes to another point that's been shared over the past few weeks. And we see it even in Isaiah 6. Zacchaeus showed up as Zacchaeus. Like he hadn't done anything different, right? And it's beautiful that Jesus accepted him and welcomed him into fellowship without Zacchaeus being the new guy. Jesus accepted him as just old Zacchaeus, right? But we see that pattern throughout the Bible. We see it reflected in Isaiah's story too. Isaiah showed up as Isaiah. Because Isaiah sees God, there's some things that Isaiah wants to change. And because Isaiah wants to change, God says, I'm the one to change you, right? So we get a calling, we get called, but then our God cleanses us for that call. And, and I think that's beautiful. We get, God, I think it's a reflection of how much he cares, right? God cares so much that he provides us everything we need in order to do the thing that he's assigning us to do. So he'll clean us up for the call that he is giving us. Zacchaeus gets to lunch with Jesus, gets a closer view, a better view, and as a result of seeing him, he wants to make bigger changes. His desire to please God grows. And again, we see this pattern throughout the Bible, and I think that we can relate to it even in our lives. Like, man, as I learned more about who he is, as I experienced God's nature in my life, I wanted to do more to please him, because just in me seeing who he is, he has brought such great pleasure to me. And I think that's what happens when we see God, right? There's so many cases of that. We talk about Moses. When Moses saw God, like Moses was more willing to do what he was called to do. We see it in, of course, Isaiah has been shared. But then also I think about an account with Peter, right? When Peter was on that boat, he had been fishing all night. They hadn't caught anything. They come to the shore with empty nets. Jesus tells him to go out, cast the net again. He does it and catches a boat sinking load of fish. Peter bumped the fish. Peter comes back, doesn't even wait for the boat to get to shore. It says he jumps out of the boat, wades through the water, gets to the shore, sees Jesus, falls to his knees and says, I am sinful. Like, seeing who you are caused me to really see myself. And now I have a desire to change. I desire to be more pleasing to you. And I think that this is a, I'll use this word, a natural or spiritual response to seeing who he is. When we see him, we would want to be more like him. When we see him, we would want to do better. A part of seeing him is seeing how much I think this is what happens too. All the stuff I heard about him from religious people, I found that not to be true, right? And all the stuff that I thought I was going to have to do in order to be embraced by him, he didn't even hold any of that as a qualification. And that makes me want to be like him more. That makes me want to receive him more. That makes me want to welcome him more, because I was trying to imagine how I was just going to become, like, I was trying to imagine myself living up to the standards that other people set for me, and I was seeing it as impossible. So why even go through the trouble? But then when I met him and I realized that none of that was a qualification, wow, I'm ready. Like, I believe Zacchaeus was ready to, hey, let's do what we got to do. I'm ready to empty the bank, make everything that was wrong. I'm ready to make it right. And he had a desire to please God. His perspective, his position in being able to see Jesus caused and built in him a desire to be pleasing to Jesus. So he wanted to do things that were pleasing to him. And really, I mean, what other way is there to define what it means to be holy? I mean, to be holy is to live a life pleasing to God, but you're not living a life pleasing to God if you're trying to live up to standards somebody else set. Like, that's not it, right? But when you've decided in yourself and really felt in your own heart that these are things that I can do to please God, and you go out to do those things, that's what it looks like to be pleasing to God. Not pleasing to people, but pleasing to God. Another a part of this conversation was noticing, being aware of old ways we thought about what it meant to be holy versus this. There has seemed to be this fight or this battle in the church for years, where there was this definition of holiness that always was opposed to how to really live it out, that never really worked, right? And as time went on, you had the established voice in the church that says that, hey, holiness has to look like this. And if we be honest and look back over the result of that, the result hasn't been good. What we found out was that there are a lot of people who would rather not have anything to do with that. And I know in our interactions with people who are outside of the church, there are many people who say, man, I got my relationship with God. I do these things in order to please God, right? I don't have to do those things in order to have a relationship with God. A lot of people outside of church have come to that conclusion because they didn't want to embrace the rules, the expectations, or the standards that other people had set for them. But what we see played out in this story of Zacchaeus is he met the man for himself. He was no longer in bondage to what they said or what they thought. He met him for himself, and he walked away with his own experience. And truth be told, all of us have been all of us that I'm talking to have been introduced to Jesus personally, right? And we don't have to try to replace our actual interactions with him with what other people have said about him, or even try to replace what we know in our heart he's actually requiring and asking of us with what others have set as a standard for how we live for him, right? We don't have to live that life. We can embrace real holiness, which is very personal, very much customized for what he's called you to do. The question still stands. You can do a whole bunch of stuff, but are you doing what it is that he's actually asked you to do, right? And I think with the parents in the room, we know what that feels like. Like, don't tell me all this stuff that you did and you didn't do the thing that I told you to do, right? Like, for real. And I think that God definitely gives a nod to parents. When we say that to our kids, God's like, yep, that's what I've been trying to tell them. That's what I've been trying to tell you, right? The religious people of his day, Zacchaeus' day, like religious people today, discounted Zacchaeus' opportunity because it didn't look the way they thought it should, right? And I think that one of the things that Sunday's message and the messages from previous weeks from Pastor Brian help us do, or they're calling us to really have our eyes open. We're change agents, right? So a lot of times God is using us to bring change to other people. So in that, we have the opportunity to have our eyes open to what is it that I'm offering this person? Am I offering this person the journey that I walked in, or am I really just trying to introduce them to the God that will give them their own? Am I offering this person some suggestions or some rules or some standards that I've set for holy living? Or am I really just trying to introduce this person to Jesus, and Jesus will design and craft a personal relationship with them on his own? That's a question for the change agent. Yes. So Zacchaeus has this lunch. I keep wanting to call it a lunch date. Lunch date with Jesus. He has a lunch date with Jesus. In it, he cultivates this desire to be pleasing with God. There's some decisions that he makes in response to actually meeting Jesus. And I think that this is the place that we all want to live out of. Like, what are we doing in response to who Jesus has shown himself to be in our lives? And that's what calls for transformation, right? As we go into the weekend, as we move forward through this year, I think that that's a important thing to grab, right? Like, what is it that God has really called me to? And what has he set as a requirement for me to live up to that call? There's so much noise. There's so many other expectations. At the end of the day, I want to live up to what God expects from me, because he's my maker. He's my creator, right? And I want to live a life that is most pleasing to him. Amen. Amen. I feel like I'm done. Today's a good day. It's Thursday all day. The weekend is coming. We appreciate you so much. We appreciate our church. There's some amazing things happening as we close out this month and enter into February on the 27th, if I'm not mistaken, right? Saturday evening, we're having the Investors Recap. And you know who you are. If you're invited, come and join us for that. Sunday is a fun day. So wherever you are, come expecting to hear from God and receive some good stuff that will lead you into your infinitely more. As you go through this day, go through it knowing that God loves you. We do too. Keep attending and keep being most blessed. Love you.